Good.
All right. All right. We got Branden Miller and Bill Gardner on focusing on the Fool, building awareness and training program. Give it up for them.
If this presentation sucks, it's Branden's fault because it was his idea. We hatched this at lunch at AID a couple months ago to do this together because we both realized we had the same talk, and if we put them together, they'd be a lot better than they are now. So, is this thing going to work? So, do this part.
Okay, so here's the agenda, and I'll be honest with you, I do have a hidden one. I always have a hidden agenda. So there you go. Intro, who, what, how, conclusion. Simple enough. Hidden agenda. I'm tired of people. All right, I've been doing information security for a while. I'm tired of my counterparts always constantly saying things like, man, these guys are idiots. I wish they would just stop doing that. Or, in the case of like Boris, just stop clicking on shit. When will users stop clicking on shit? Well, that's why we kind of created this presentation, is to let you know that it's not just their fault, it's our fault. We're the professionals, right? So if they're doing something bad, they're idiots for a reason. They're fools for a reason. It's because they haven't been told. Or if they've been told, they haven't been told enough, or they haven't been told in a manner in which they can either understand or not forget. So that's how this was created. That's the reason.
So here's the Who Am I slides. I'm Bill Gardner, and you might know me as Onsi on the internets. I'm Vice President of AID and on the board. We do a conference every year. appyide.org is the URL. Co-founder of HackerCon. HackerCon's coming up in October. HackerCon.org. CFP is open. I'm a co-founder of 304 Geeks. We're a 501c3, and I do a lot of this. I go, taught the schools, civic groups, Girl Scout groups, which was really challenging about information security awareness, and my slides just died. Okay, so.
All right, so I'm Branden Miller. I go by Fozzie because I'm hairy and have bad jokes. So just like Fozzie Bear, that's me. Basically, I work for a healthcare entity. We have over 10,000 users, and only 4,000 are permanent staff. So that has some of its challenges, right? We have vendors jumping in and out constantly. There's my bio. I don't put up a lot of pictures of myself because honestly, this is the first time I've ever been recorded, and there's a reason for that. I'm not a prepper, but I'm a conspiracy guy. So I think everything's a conspiracy. And as you'll notice, down there at the bottom, National Cryptologic School, they're attributed with a certain agency, and I'm a conspiracy theorist, so that's the reason. Didn't start out life that way. Okay, yeah. So just so you know, I made most of these slides. I'll tell you that right off the bat, and Bill just kind of hijacked them. So I had to come up with a little code to tell who's who. The problem is we both start with B, Branden and Bill. So I had to switch to M for me. So he will correct me quite often because I'm expecting to see a B, and I'll probably start talking on his slides. But why do we do it? Because it's a good idea. Honestly, it can be cheaper. Once again, healthcare, I deal with HIPAA. And it's always cheaper if you do something up front. It doesn't matter how many millions of dollars it costs, it's cheaper, believe me. We just had an audit in January, it's cheaper, okay? So we're still waiting on the Office of Civil Rights to finish their audit. It's gonna be fun. All right.
So there's a lot of different threats out there. When I talk about information security awareness people, I'm like, the first thing you have to talk about is threat. A lot of guys sit around thinking, nobody wants my files, they're boring, they're old. In my case, I work at a law firm. Law firms are being targeted. They're being targeted for intellectual property. They're being targeted by hacktivists. They're being targeted by people like Dave Kennedy. So there's definite threat out there. Is that B? It's me. We don't even know what B means. So there's all these things that we're dealing with now. We need to be compliant. So even if you're doing internal pen testing, you're doing external pen testing, what about the people? Attacking the person is the easiest thing to do. And that's the reason, Dave, we're at SET. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of literature now on social engineering. The only defense is to inform these poor people who work with you or for you about these threats so they know that, hey, I need to not do certain things. They're foolish.
Yeah, something else that all these have in common is every one of these, whether they be laws, regulations, standards, protocols, whatever you want to call them, they all have something that addresses training. So warn employees. I'm going to go ahead and skip that one. One thing I will say is this right here. When employees do stupid stuff, I know that's your slide. When employees do stupid stuff, it's our fault. Once again, we're the professionals. The thing I always like to say to our doctors is this. If you're smoking, how can you tell someone else not to smoke? If you're doing stupid stuff, how can you call them stupid? You're doing the same stuff, right? So make sure that as professionals, you're not doing this stuff. And you're also teaching. Just take time.
For a second. I work with lawyers. It's the worst date I've ever been on. Do we need to start over?
Slide one, anyone?
God forbid. Just keep talking. So I work for lawyers, and lawyers are the worst people in the world to think that things don't apply to them. HIPAA High Tech has changed that. If you're a business associate of a covered entity, we're now being told we've been thrown under the HIPAA bus. We don't know which wheel of the HIPAA bus at this point, but things are going to change for different entities out there who are business associates. Some other examples would be people who either store data or destroy data. I think we're all going to end up in the same pot before it's all over with.
All right, is anybody out there familiar with the Ponemon Institute? So they do annual reports, right? If you're not familiar with these guys, get familiar. One of the things that they do, and we leverage all the time, is they put a dollar figure against everything. So they can tell you, in the case of a hospital, if you lose a single record, patient record, how much it's going to cost you. It's $312 per record. Average breach for a hospital is 20,000 records. It's easy to do that math and turn around and ask for funds for training, awareness, defense, whatever you need. Especially in the case of, it's really poignant whenever a clinic gets a grant for $1.2 million and then you point out to them how they're going to cost the hospital $4 million in fines. It's very easy to generate a business case and fix that.
I know this is your slide, I have something to say about this. Also, states have breach notification laws, and that costs money. If you are required under state law, if you lose PII, most states, I know West Virginia does, you've got, depending on how the size of the breach, you have to notify those folks that you've lost their information. They need to do whatever they need to do to protect themselves. So, once again, threats. I'm the threats guy. I'm kind of the nuts and bolts guy of this. So why do people break into computers? Mainly it's money, identity theft, credit card threats. Here's our Eastern European neighbors tend to engage in this sort of stuff. And then you have industrial espionage and trade secrets. If I can steal the formula for Coke, and I live in the Far East, well, I can start making Coke and not pay the royalties. Our friends in China have been making off our intellectual property for years. Hacktivism, LawSec, Anonymous, they've recently begun to target other entities, not just Sony. They've started to target law firms as well. And bragging rights. See website defacements all the time where it's just basic, where somebody, I'm going to say script kiddie, has broken into someone's site and defaced it, just say, hey, look what I can do. And this is something you need to tell the people when you're doing your training of what these threats are and what their motivations are, because everyone still asks, why does anyone want my information?
Now we're going to get into the actual awareness and training program, the building of a program. One of the things I'll say is there's an organization that was started last year called the Security Awareness Training Framework. It's .org if you want to look it up. They're hopefully going to have a presentation this year at DerbyCon to actually kind of kick off this is our 1-year anniversary. This is what we're providing to the community. But both Bill and I are contributors to that. Anyone can contribute. We just ask that you don't constantly jump in and out. There's a lot of people that seem to jump in whenever they have something to say, but they won't jump in when there's work to do. So we need people to help, all right? So right off the bat, there's a traditional thinking that awareness and training are the same thing, and they're actually not. Awareness is the typical poster on the wall, right? It's one way. The whole purpose is to reinforce a concept or idea. It's not to actually really get people to carry something through. It's simply, this is what a good link looks like. I'm not going to click anything that doesn't look like that link, okay? It's a behavioral issue. Training, the purpose of training is actually produce a relevant expectation or result. So this would be, hey, I remember some guy saying that link looks bad. Instead of not just clicking it, maybe I should report that to someone. Take a screenshot. Do something. So that would be the effect of training. And then education is kind of a holistic approach. That is usually your higher level thinkers, people that are actually putting together these programs, things of that nature. So too often I see people lop in, especially awareness and training together. They're not the same thing. One of the examples I like to give as to how they can become the same thing, instead of having awareness posters plastered all over our hospital, I actually have built an A-frame, and I put it over my shoulders, and I put a poster on the front and a poster on the back. And if anybody stops me and says, what do you mean by this? Then I initiate training. Actually tell them what it is that I'm promoting, how they can keep their eyes open and defend against it, right? So that would be the marrying of awareness and training. If you're going to put up a poster on the wall, don't call it training. That's not what it is, all right? Any questions about that? 'Cause that's the number one question I get. What's the difference? Professional development, obviously this is different also. A lot of people try to integrate awareness into professional development. It's not the same thing. All right, that's on you. That's trying to figure out how you can prove to people you know what you're talking about, you know what your skills are, and you can show them a piece of paper, right? Doesn't always equate, but that's different. I wanted to point that out. All right, I'm a fan of NIST. Anybody else a fan of NIST? Okay, a lot of people usually don't raise their hands because they're kind of full of themselves and they're technical in nature. Go figure. I steal this from them. I put it in every presentation I do, and it's just because I'm a visual guy. It's kind of hard to read, but you'll see security awareness is at the bottom, and that's for everyone. Everyone needs to be aware, regardless of what your job is. If you see a piece of paper on the floor, you pick it up and you notice it has credit card information, a janitor needs to know what to do with that just as much as a doctor, just as much as a lawyer, just as much as an IT person, right? You put it in your pocket and you use it later. Security basics and literacy, that's mostly targeted towards your IT personnel, all right, or people that work on IT systems. So that's a little bit more advanced, but not necessarily for that person that doesn't even have a login, all right? Then you have your training, and your training should be specific to what it is that their job function is. So how does their particular job roll into your IT system? And then education, and I love that they put experience up there because people think that just because they're educated, they know what they're doing, and that's not necessarily true, right? You have to be able to apply it. You have to have those life-defining moments that help you determine what's right and wrong at that time. So how do we do it? Now that we kind of understand what it is, how do we do it? Well, you got to get buy-in, number one. These are kind of the three approaches. A lot of people like the top-down approach because that's where the C-level guys say, hey, this is a good idea and it's law and we're going to do it. I hate that idea. All right, a lot of people like the bottom-up approach, thinking if we spend enough time, effort, and money to teach all the young people, whenever they become the leaders of this organization, they're going to do this naturally. I don't like that approach either, because nobody sticks around with a company for long enough, right? So you're training the next guy for your competitor, basically. I actually like a blended approach. You get approval from the C-level guys, because that's usually how you get funding. You start training the bottom guys, right? You have targeted training for every level. The C-level guys, one of the things they need to understand, they're going to get training too. You're going to need 5 to 10 minutes of their time regularly. All right. Some of those, like FSMA, HIPAA, all those laws and regulations, they actually stipulate that training has to happen at all levels. I can tell you through the audit, they will check. They will go to your CIO and say, when's the last time you had training? All right? Questions so far? Okay, so now that you've gotten funding, hopefully, or as my boss likes to say, you got funding whenever you got hired. It's called your salary. What you need to do is what's called a needs assessment. Start asking people, hey, what do you know? Is it bad to click on this? Is it good to click on that? When's the last time you've had training? These are just simple questions. Try to build an idea of what it is you're already doing, all right? Then you try to determine what it is you want to do. Hopefully compliance is going to be in there, but that's not going to be the be-all, end-all. I'll tell you right now, regardless of what laws are written, compliance is not enough, okay? That should be your starting point. Now, if you don't have a program and you're not compliant, that should be step one, let's be honest, right? Stop the fines. But then you need to grow your program above and beyond that. Don't go crazy. I've seen needs assessments with the U.S. Navy whenever I worked for them last 18 months. In 18 months, you don't even have the same people that you asked the questions of. Let's get this timely. Make sure it's relevant. Gap analysis, this is just basically, hey, this is what we do. This is where we need to be. I need to build this training. I need to build that gap. Develop a plan. You'll see a little bit later, I always say beg, borrow, and steal. Your plan doesn't have to be your plan. It can be someone else's plan. One of the first things I did was we have this consortium of university hospitals, and I went to the top and saw Kansas University Medical Center. And I said, hey, let me write them an email. Ask them for their plan. That's now my plan. It works wonderfully. I built my plan in about a week. I did Control F first, find and replace, and then I pitched it to my boss, and he wanted to make some changes. That's fine. The point is I piggybacked all their research. We have the same people. We have the same focus. We've actually poached a lot of their doctors and nurses. So go figure. But what you have to have, number one, is a scope. What is going to be your responsibility? What are you trying to accomplish, right? Hopefully funding comes on with that. Goals and outcomes. Once again, don't go crazy on these. If you don't have a program, start something. Something is better than nothing on most occasions. Are you going to make training mandatory or optional? I always like to say this question isn't really optional. All right? Training should be mandatory for everyone. As soon as you make it optional, only the people that truly care are going to show up. And those 5 people are going to be the best trained people in your 200-person corporation. All right? Here's some of the topics. The reason why I picked these is because these are readily available. You can borrow this information from a lot of people that believe in open source information. So you can find training topics, awareness campaigns built on each one of these topics, and they're easy. It's called the Google machine. All right?
Thank you. These comes from basically what I've built as some topics in my awareness and training program. They're not everything. It's not all-inclusive. As far as making things optional or mandatory, if you can find some way of getting continuing education credit for your folks, it's a carrot and stick approach. If you can give them something that they need in exchange, in my case, it's continuing legal education credits, that's much more of a buy-in from them because, hey, you're giving them something that they need and they might learn something in the process. The other thing that I do is I stick my foot in the door every time they have a firm retreat. So you're going to go play golf, huh? Well, before you hit the tee, let me talk to you for about 40 minutes for an hour about something that might save you a lot of money in the future. So, I've been able to do that. Passwords, locking computers, attachments, it all seems like common sense, but sometimes you have to remind people of things. It's like wearing your seatbelt. Most people know it's a good thing to wear their seatbelt, but they don't do it. So it's a reminder. The other thing I would say about these topics is that some people do awareness training when people first come into the organization and they forget about it. Repeating the message and finding ways of repeating that message is something that you need to do because people forget. People have a very short attention span. Also, I say focus on the no-tech hacking stuff. Dumpster diving, tailgating, shoulder surfing. Johnny Long wrote an excellent book on no-tech hacking. I highly recommend it. Go buy it. You're welcome, Johnny. Data leakage is something that most organizations don't think about. In the field of law, we've wrestled with metadata for years. Most state bars say it's open season on metadata. At least in West Virginia, we said, if you get it inadvertently, you have a duty to tell the person who sent it to you not to use it unless you have the other person's permission. So data leakage is a big thing. BTK killer was captured through metadata. They finally duped the guy into sending them some of his documents electronically. And they're like, well, where did this come from? We look at the metadata. Who's been using the computers at the church down the street? And they realize, hey, we found this guy in this cold case that's been 20 years old. So, and also hacking the news. I know you can end up with sort of a malaise after a while of hearing these stories like, oh, well, so-and-so lost 20,000 passwords last week or yesterday. But people need to be aware that possibly their data is at risk and these sorts of things are continuing to happen. It's not just something you see on CNN every once in a while.
Any questions so far? This doesn't have to be one way. All right. So how do you want to develop materials? Well, like I said, the first thing I always do is beg, borrow, and steal. Whenever I went to Kansas University, I actually asked them, wonderfully crafted email. I said, can I use your material in its entirety? And they said, replace my name with yours and you can go for it. So now I go to them first. Hey, Kansas, what have you built? What have you done for me lately? What courses have you built? Right? And they give it to me. Because whenever somebody comes to you, most people in this room, we're going to give up what we have, right? As long as it's not sensitive or proprietary. Most of us feel sorry for the guy that's just starting out. You can buy it. There's some really good programs and products out there that you can buy out of the box.
There's a lot of really bad things, too.
Yeah. So what I'll tell you on this is do your research. There's no reason. I've been testing 4 different products from companies, FishMe and companies like that, for a year now. They've given me access to their materials for 1 year. Now, sometimes it comes in 1 week increments, but I'll, set up a cron job, email them every Friday. Can I have another week? They'll give it to you. All right, as long as you're not using it in a live or production situations, they'll give it to you. Make sure you track whatever training you're delivering. You have to make sure that it's working. Nothing's worse than standing up there for 45 minutes and speaking, 0 people getting anything out of it, and you using the same presentation for the next group the next day. All right? Make sure you're getting some kind of feedback. Level 1 feedback is just literally going to the person saying, what do you think? Have them answer a couple of questions. Make changes. The first presentation I gave in front of our residents, I had a couple of people come up to me afterwards and say, other than your name, I had no clue what you were talking about. I made changes, right? I've been dealing with you guys for 20 years, not those guys. That's part of the mentality we have to get used to. And then obviously, like I said, think of any new and innovative ways. Just because you can buy a product doesn't mean you should. Like I said, the most effective thing I've done so far is put on an A-frame with a poster on the front and a poster on the back and walk around the hospital. I asked my boss if I could do it in a chicken suit. Unfortunately, he said no. But I'll tell you what, nothing gets more attention than the guy with an A-frame on and a chicken suit espousing knowledge about IT. Seriously. So here's some of the, make sure you have good metrics. Like I said, I encourage you to start following the SATF, the Security Awareness and Training Framework. And the reason is we're actually coming up with some really good ideas on how to track your training, the effectiveness. Once again, I had talked about the end of course feedback forms. We've all done them. I will caution you on them because I'll admit there's been some classes I've gone to where the AC's out and I've hammered that guy. And it's just because I was pissed off at the world. So you have to take that stuff with a grain of salt, right? Not everybody's going to be professional. If you can, and you're doing something like a once-a-year training, try to follow up after 3 to 6 months. I guarantee you'll change that annual training. You'll make it more often. From my experience, what I've seen is within 3 days, people remember about 50% of what you said. Within 3 weeks, they remember about 5% of what you said. So keep that in mind. And then level 3 is supervisors. This is something I'm not allowed to do in my organization because if a supervisor is made aware of a deficiency, they have to do a personnel file entry. So legal put a can X on that the first time I tried it. And then some don'ts of metrics: don't track the number of people trained unless you're whatever law or regulation you're trying to abide by, you're trying to be compliant with, specifically says like 100% of people reached, and you want to show that you have 200 people and you reached all 200, because that's what most people do, is they say, I've reached 200 and I'm done, and they stop, and that's the end of their program. And that's just piss poor. And it's actually a bad reflection of us as professionals. Do try to track the effectiveness. That's a hard part. There's a lot of anecdotal data, right? You can't really put a number to some things. Questions about that? Well, like I said, that's something I'm hitting pretty hard, and the SATF is trying to come up with good metrics. And once again, whatever I build, I'm just going to publish with those guys, and it's free and clear. Just give me a shout out, right? The last thing really that I have is anybody heard of the open securityarchitecture.org? These guys are wonderful. I really love what they've done. I'm a visual person. On a good day, I'm a crappy analyst, and the reason is because until I put it on paper, I can't understand it half the time. They put it on paper. I know it's kind of hard to read, but the beauty of their diagrams is they're interactive. So in this case, they have one specific for awareness and training. And if you click on any of these gray areas up here, those are actually controls. And they've mapped these controls to things such as ITIL, 27000 series, COBIT, all of that. So if you click on that top one, it says AT01 at the top right-hand side, it's actually Security Awareness and Training Policy. If you click on that, they'll show you every regulation, every law, every standard that says you have to have a written document establishing a program. That's pretty cool, I think. And then sometimes they actually give you some of the metrics that you can use, things of that nature. I really love this site. Once again, it's all free. They actually give you the ability, once you've liaised with them a little bit, to actually start uploading your own material. So I highly encourage that. It's opensecurityarchitecture.org. Any questions? You guys are almost done with this. Don't worry. Yes, go ahead.
So you're talking about it's necessary to effectively measure.
Right.
And you said there's a lot of different ways. Do you have any?
Absolutely not.
You know, we've talked about this back and forth. One of the things that we're looking at is... Hello? We've talked about this back and forth a lot because we're really breaking new ground with this. And I have a background in social science, so I'm trying to think of some metrics that we can use. One of the things that the training the security awareness training framework did was do some surveys. And that was okay, but they were kind of far afield. One of the things I've done in my organization is look at help desk tickets. How many security events do I have? Have they gone up or down? Am I getting more inquiries about links and attachments than I had before, which can be annoying as hell. I'm like, you're an educated individual, and you get an email from saying you've won the Canadian lottery and you want to know where you should send your money. You know, it gets really frustrating, but at least they're asking you. And that's the only way that I can really think of at this point. If you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, so, some of the ones like academia we'll talk about is do a pre-test and a post-test anytime you give training. But to be honest with you, a lot of the truly effective metrics currently are just astronomical in price or manpower. So one of the things I didn't show up there, I showed 3 levels of feedback. There's a 4th level, and that 4th level is scenario based, and that's what every one of them will encourage you to do. What you want to do is make people aware, train them, test them, wait 3 months, so you're doing the whole program. Wait 3 months, come back and get feedback again from their supervisor, wait 1 year, and then give them a scenario-based test. How many people have the time, money, or energy to do that? And that's really the metrics that a lot of academia is going after, right? They're saying, well, the only effective way to do this is the scenario-based 1 year later training. You have a, yes?
One problem with the situation you mentioned where your organization, they start giving you a bunch of feedback, like, hey, there's these bad things, or whatever. That initially appears that your training worked, that they're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, those start to drop.
Right.
Responses start to drop, and then you're not sure, is it because they're not catching them anymore, or because, hey, they did learn, and they just don't bring it to your attention, and now they got it.
Yeah, because a lot of times... Yeah, a lot of times they'll provide feedback. Hold on. A lot of times they'll provide feedback for a certain period of time, and if they don't get feedback and response, they think nobody's listening. That's more of a cultural issue, but yeah.
You know, next time we're going to get 2 microphones. You raise a very valid point, and one of the issues is sort of like if you're a defender, how do you know which shells got through your defenses and you're popped and how long you've been popped? It's the same question. As you're not seeing alerts, how do you know that things are working? Valid question. I don't know that I have an answer. I mean, I get mad, not mad, I get kind of annoyed with the same question over and over. Is this a scam? Well, hell, if you had to ask me if it's a scam, it's a scam. Yeah, so I'm like, delete it. And then I'm like, well, if they're not telling me, how do I know, A, that they're receiving this sort of stuff, and B, that they're reacting to it? And that's a very valid point. But I'm not sure how you measure that. And if any of you have any ideas, I think that's one of the gap analysis. That's one of our gaps.
Yes, another question. Health stream. Yeah. Yes, no, that would. Yes, no. Yes, that would actually be a good idea. Yes, that absolutely is a metric. One of the things I will caution you, though, is a lot of management will say, how many people have you trained? And that'll be what they see as effective. So what you want to do in those instances is highlight the results, not the input. Everybody wants to highlight the input, the number of butts and seats. Highlight the result.
What I'd have to say about that is a great idea, but a lot of people will say they don't have time. You won't get a big response. I say one of the reasons I try to measure this passively is that people's perception that they're busy is not going to get in the way. But you know, that's something I fight with all the time. You know, I'm in the billboard hour paradigm. You know, that's how we make money. If I'm even to take 40 minutes to set through training is a major teeth pulling operation. So I understand what you're saying, but I think it's going to be tough in some organizations to actually get something that's meaningful. I think Brandon's way more academic than I am because I'm kind of an operational guy. He also has a much bigger organization, and we're trying to get some idea with these frameworks to scale. Either if you're like a 4-person organization or if you're a 4,000 person organization. And that may be a big, you know, a really big bite out of what we're trying to do, but that's what we're trying to do.
One more thing I would suggest, especially whenever you get that C-level buy-in, I was fortunate enough that we actually have like a chief of education since we're a university medical center. Well, I just got a little 3-sentence memo, and the gist of it was he was directing his education personnel that in order for someone to get credit for a course that they were taking, they had to take my survey. The only thing that he asked was, I don't make people take the survey more than twice a year. So that was really nice. So if you go to a 1-hour continuing education session for credentials, like you're an MD, you got to get things, training that's other than MD related. So people take, you know, management classes. In order to get credit, you have to take my 5-question, 10-question survey, depending on how I do. Yes. Yes, sir.
Quick question. Would you include the metrics before and after maybe the 9 social engineering attacks?
Yes. The question is, would you include in your metrics social engineering attacks, whether they be benign or otherwise? I absolutely do. If kind of what Bill was alluding to, he just didn't say it very good because he's not as good of a speaker as I am, is false positives are key, false negatives are key. You have to be able to track those. Like he said, if people aren't telling you about the things that they averted for your company, you don't have a good program, because that's just as important. If you can actually say, you know, everybody's got log files. You can go to your Exchange server and say how many emails were blocked as spam or spear phishing. If you have a SIM or whatever you have, however you're trying to manage that, you can get that number. But if you actually have, and you tell managers, you had 5 of your 7 employees report this, that is much better, because then they can put a face to it, and it's not just the system that's hurt. So yeah, I always like to track negative results as well as positive results.
What I would have to say about that is if you've got an internal pen testing team or someone who can do it, yes, do it that way. If you need to look externally, there's what is that site? There's a service out there. Is it fishme.com? Is that correct? There, you know, turn to those. I use SET internally. One of the things I want to know is, are they clicking links? Are they opening attachments? And is my antivirus working? So, and I can encode the heck out of it, and, you know, sometimes I get through and sometimes I don't. But it's something so I can sleep at night as much as anything else. I mean, one of the success measurements is, have you been pwned? You know, if you haven't had a breach, is that a success? Is that a metrical way of measuring that? Well, yes, but not really. So, you know, very true.
Yeah, that's the question. Everybody's got known at some time. They just either don't know it or won't admit to it. Excellent questions. Any more? Those are good. Metrics are quite possibly the hardest thing to get your hands around, and that's true of just about any management decision tool.
There's one other thing I want to say. I'm not sure if there's anyone from that project on the framework. There may be.
Right.
I mean, there's enough people who come and go and have contributed that I don't really have track of everybody at this point.
They're actually someone I started someone. That's an organization I've started a dialogue with because they do have a lot of open source material. I just want to make sure I'm using what's open source and not using what's not. Yes, and their monthly magazine's really good. I do a presentation. I have like a booth once a month at different places in our hospital, and that's the #1 item taken because it's written on a very low level that anyone, my 12-year-old understands the magazine that they put out, so that's really nice.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, question.
What framework do you use for your formal risk assessments?
In my organization?
How do you measure risk and identify risk?
So that's something that as a result of our recent audit, we are changing. So I'll tell you that we're no longer using our previous framework. How about that? That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of frameworks out there. For our business continuity, he wants to use, I think it's called FAIR, right? But that doesn't integrate with COBIT, which is what my organization was trying to use. And unfortunately, the way that we're split up, we have a risk management office that only cares about physicians being sued. So they're out of it. We have an internal audit section that works for the university, but not the hospital. But since the university is above us, we have to abide by what they use. And by the way, we just noticed they ripped off University of New Hampshire. They sent out one of their questionnaires, pre-assessment questionnaires, and they still had some UNH systems in there. So I can't tell you what they're using. I can tell you that we use a bastardization of COBIT, if that makes sense. So because it's not enterprise-wide and COBIT was enterprise-wide, we just kind of stripped out what we wanted.
And we use, oh my God, did you see that? Let's write a check, literally. Lawyers think that it's like being 20 years old again. I can drive in this car 100 miles an hour. I'm not going to get hurt. And literally, you have to go in there and go, we have this issue and we need to fix it. And they're like, well, why didn't you tell us this? I'm like, I've told you this for years. So I'll probably be fired by the time I get back to Charleston. So if anyone has a job opening, let me know.
And my boss gave me a free get out of jail card. So as long as I don't mention what organization I work for, I can say whatever I want. So that is basically our presentation. I will ask that you give feedback. All right? Obviously.
Our next presentation's at 11 o'clock.